Hey folks, welcome in. This is Chris with Alpenglow Digital. In today's video, we are going to take a look at the Power Platform Creator Kit, which is a component library that contains pre-made components that you can import into your Power Apps environment and then add to your own Power Apps. You can pick and choose the specific components that you want to add. We have about 40 components in the Creator Kit at the timing of this video. We're only going to touch on a handful in this video. We're going to cover how to download the Creator Kit, import it into your environment, and then add specific components, which you see here on the left, to your app and then present them here on your screen. We're going to cover how to add a simple header component, a spinner, a cool little horizontal bar chart, and then one of my favorite components is the auto width text label. So previously you had auto height, but you did not have auto width in Power Apps. And that was kind of a bummer if you wanted to change your text dynamically. It was a little hard to size your text label, but this auto width text label solves that problem. There are a bunch of great things packed in the Creator Kit. One of the important things we'll do is take a look at the documentation because not all of them are super intuitive. So without further ado, let's go. Hey folks, welcome into Power Apps. We are eventually going to create a brand new Canvas app. We'll probably start with a blank canvas. We're going to talk about importing the Creator Kit solution and then importing those specific components into our blank app and then utilizing them within the app. But before we do that, let's walk through how to actually get the Creator Kit. And there's one very important call out. So I'll put this link in the description. If you just search for Power Platform Creator Kit, you'll be taken to Microsoft's Learn site and you'll probably find the same resources. The one big call out is right here. It says, before you download and install the Creator Kit, ensure that you enable code components in your environment. So let's take a look at what this means. All right, if we click on this link, we're going to be taken to a page that looks like this. And what this boils down to is that you will need admin access or be able to work with one of your environment admins to enable this. It walks through the steps of going into the admin center, going to your environments, and turning on a product feature. So I'm going to do that now in my environment. I am an admin. So if I come back up here to the top, scroll all the way to the top, we'll let this banner go away for a second. Come up here, go to Admin Center. It'll take a second to load. I am using the new Admin Center. There's a little toggle up here. So if yours looks a little bit different, that might be why. On the left here, I'm going to go to Manage. I only have my one environment. And then I am going to click Settings up here at the top. Doesn't matter how you get here as long as you eventually get to your environment settings. And then under product, we have an option for features. This will take a second to load. And on the right hand side, if you scroll down, you'll see an option for Power Apps component framework for Canvas app. And this is what we want to toggle on. And make sure right behind my little logo down here on the right, you click the save button here. What this allows you to do is use code that was not necessarily generated by Microsoft. And so you could import these little code components and use them in their app. Again, this is a potential security risk if you don't trust the source. So do not import solutions that you do not trust, essentially. Okay, with this saved, let's go back to Power Apps. Before we create our app, we do need to actually download and then import the Creator Kit solution into Power Apps. So back on this page, you can click the Download the Creator Kit, and this will download a zip file for you. And then we're going to bounce back over to our Power Apps environment and import the solution. Back here in Power Apps, we're going to go down to the Solutions tab. We are going to click Import Solution, and we're going to click Browse and go grab that zip file on your desktop or your downloads folder or wherever it ended up, and then click Next. So I have mine selected. It is processing. Give you a little bit of information about who created it and description for it, and then you're going to click Import. Up here at the top, you will probably see a little status symbol which just says, hey, it's currently importing. In my experiences, this can take several minutes, so I'm going to pause the video and resume once this is fully imported. All right, assuming you don't get an error. If you do get an error, it may be because you don't have the correct authority to import a solution. Again, if you can get up here to Admin Center and change some of those admin settings, I'm guessing that you do have the correct level of permission in your environment, but you may not. And so just work with your tenant admin to get that done. If you come in here to Managed, you'll see the Creator Kit as a new solution. I imported this a couple days ago, which is why that date is a little bit old. And so now we have it in our environment, and we can go and add specific components to our Power App. Since the purpose is kind of to create apps from scratch, I'm just going to start with the blank canvas app and use a tablet size for now. We'll let this set up, and then we will take a look at how to actually pick out some of the specific components from the Creator Kit, get those into our app, and then add them to our screen. Here we are in our blank canvas app, and let's go track down some of these components. So if we come over here on the left to insert, there's this little option right here that says get more components. And if everything has been installed correctly, you should see two tabs up here, one for Canvas and one for code. You can see the PowerCat component library. That was some of the components that came with that Creator Kit. And so we're going to take a look at how to add and edit a couple of these. They're very cool. They're more kind of UI focused elements. And then over here on the code side, you can see a bunch of different options that all kind of match that Fluent design pattern that Microsoft is used to. So we'll take a look at some of these too. Again, too many to cover in this video. I'll hand pick a few that I think are nice and useful, and we'll show how to add those to your app. So let's start with some Canvas components. So my favorite use case for this particular library is really to build things quickly. If you don't need something to be custom made, especially design-wise, and you like Microsoft's design aesthetic, then this component library is great for building quick MVPs, for doing a lot of things that you would commonly do in Power Apps. And instead of building those from scratch every time, you can simply import these components and have the same functionality. So let's take a look at maybe the dialog, which is kind of a pop-up. So if we select this and go to import, it won't add anything to the screen initially. What you will see is hopefully a comment here that says your component was successfully imported. And then on the left-hand side, where you insert other elements, you should see library components with now a dialog component. So when you click add, it's going to add a lot to our screen. So if you haven't used components before, essentially these are kind of built in their own little mini environment. You import them into a larger application as we've done here, and then only certain pieces of the aesthetic or the text are made visible. So on the right here, you can see kind of what our options are. So the buttons, cancel and save, are up here kind of in this table data value. So you could change those and what each does. The title is here, you could change that, the overlay color, the size of the actual pop-up, and things like that. So you can't go and change every single thing around here as if you made it from scratch, which would be one advantage from doing it yourself. But again, for quick MVPs or things that you don't care to spend a lot of time on design-wise, this is a great spot to start. So let's first take a look at how would you even toggle this. You'll see this sort of pop up on websites and a lot of Power Apps if they're a little bit more complicated that you may be using. And if I'm going to use something like this in Power Apps, I like to control the visibility of this dialog or pop-up using a variable. So let's do that now, and we'll add a button here that can kind of toggle this on and off so you can kind of envision how you might use one of these pre-made components. So if we come in here to dialog, we're going to choose the visibility property of the component. Right now it's always showing, which is because it's set to true. And let's say show pop-up. That's going to be a variable. We haven't defined it yet. It will be here in a second. Let's say in our apps on start property, we set this to false, so we don't have it showing. We'll run on start so we get rid of that error. And then let's just add a quick button. And this is going to say show pop-up. And the onSelect property for the button is going to say set show pop-up to true. And I'm just going to run my app one more time. And so now if we play this, click show pop-up, you will see that the pop-up shows. I'm going to move my button. I'm going to send it to the back so that the pop-up is kind of correctly in front of the button. Great. Okay, so now we obviously need a way to close this pop-up. Let's look at how we can use the component properties to do that. So if we select our dialog again, we again have a few display properties here. In the advanced tab, you'll see actions here. We have two actions, on button select and on close select. So what's interesting about this is on close select for this particular component pertains to this little X right here. So if we were to set this to maybe not show our pop-up anymore, show pop-up false, set that, play it, click this, goes away, show pop-up again, here it is. What's interesting though is we have two buttons here, cancel and save, right out of the box, and only one on button select property. So let's talk about how to have cancel do something and save do something else when we just have one action property to work with. So before we add any code here to onButtonSelect, let's take a look at how the buttons are defined by this component. So if I open this up, let's say format text. So you've got a table which just have two objects. So each button has a label, which is the actual text you see, a button type, which looks like this refers to kind of something based off the theme. So this is the standard button and the primary button based on the theme. And then it has a Boolean value for whether or not it has a border. Both of these don't seem to have borders. So what's nice is what's unique about each one is probably going to be the label. So if we come back up here to onButtonSelect, we're going to do an if statement. And it's going to say if you click the cancel button, do this. Otherwise, I assume you're clicking the save button, therefore do something else. So normal if statement, we're going to open it up. And this is going to be self.selectedButton.label. So we're accessing the button label properties from the two buttons here. So if that equals cancel, then what I want to do is close this pop-up. So I'll set that to false. If this condition is not true and we're not clicking the cancel button, we must be clicking the save button. Therefore, let's notify and just say your changes have been saved. All right, again, just a notification, nothing that exciting. So let's give this a go. So again, this is assuming that if the cancel button is selected, we just simply close the pop-up. If it is not the cancel button be selected, we assumed it's save, and here you could, in theory, save changes or do something like that. So let's firstly click cancel, that goes away, pop up again, click save, and you will see that it says your changes have been saved. So that is how you would work with one action property, in this case for the dialog, but two separate entities that you need to kind of control. All right, so that's kind of how you would use this dialog component. I don't want to spend too much more time on this specific component because there's a lot of other fun ones that I want to cover, and I don't want to make this video too long where you get bored. So let's get rid of the dialog and get rid of that button for now. And let's go find a new component. Let's do one more canvas component, and then let's take a look at a couple code items. So one that I like a lot is just a simple header. This is going to look nothing fancy. So again, I'm going to import it. You'll see it's successfully imported. Boom, added to the page, and it's automatically full width. Comes with an icon, comes with a text label here in the middle, and then another icon for settings. If you come over here and look at the properties, you can manage the different colors, and you can either toggle stuff off. So maybe this was kind of meant to be, if it is part of a broader application, you can have a back button to go to a previous screen. If not, you can show the icon. You can also choose, this is an SVG right here, but if you didn't want anything, maybe there's just no image. So let's just get rid of this. And then you'll see that there's no image anymore on the left. Again, almost every application I make has a header that looks somewhat similar to this. And it's really nice to just have this right out of the box, especially again for MVPs, quick builds. You just need something. Maybe you want to specify an icon and a name and call it good. This is a quick, easy way to do that. So shout out to the header component. Not a lot else here. You can, again, if you had a back button or a right button or whatever you have up here, you can change how that functions, probably navigating between screens, and then do some simple things with the UI right here. So I erased those components. Let's start from scratch. Let's go back over here and let's do some code components. There are a lot of great ones. They cover almost anything you would need UI-wise in a website or in a Power App. They do things like breadcrumbs. One of my favorite ones is this auto width label. So this is going to add a text label to your app. So again, I imported another one too. It comes over here in the code components folder, whereas our previous ones are in the library components. So if you add the auto width label, what it will do is it will change the width of this label based on the text inside it, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you've used Power Apps for a while, you know that auto height exists for labels, but auto width does not right out of the box, at least. And so it's always been kind of a pain to ensure that your label is the right width, especially if you're changing content or changing screen sizes and things like that. This auto width label is awesome. So there are a couple things you need to do once you add this. It is a little bit odd that it's an auto width label by default. If you come over here to the display pane, it sets a size properties, height and width, statically, rather than the width being auto by default, which is what I would expect to have happened. What you can do here is if you go to width, instead of just the statically type 200, if you select the actual name of the label, auto width label 1 in this case, type auto width, you will see that the width adjusts to the actual width of the text. So if I come back up here, click text, and say I want to add this to make this a little bit longer, super long text. As I add longer text, you will see the width of this adjust to accommodate the longer text, which is great. Again, not a big deal previously, but if you do use labels a lot, this is just awesome to have. And I use these almost anytime I need to do a text label these days. I will use one of these from the Creator Kit rather than just a plain, insert text label here, because the auto width is so great. Again, a lot of different display options here that you would expect if you are using a text label, colors, font weights, borders, things like that. It really gives you a lot of options, and it's not limiting really compared to a standard text label. Okay, let's go take a look at another code component. All right, I grabbed a handful of code components again over here, click them, import, and then they pop up over here under code components. I'm not going to go through each of them. I wanted to highlight really quickly a simple one, which is the spinner, and then talk about one that's a little bit more complex, and that's the horizontal bar chart. So here's the spinner. Again, it's easy to imagine how you'd use a loading spinner. In this case, it's pretty small. So you could use it maybe if you are running a Power Automate flow and you want the user to wait before the flow returns with some data, or you're just refreshing little components within your Power Apps. There are a couple of options over here. The spinner size. This is large, and it's really not that big, but you can see even if I resize this kind of spinner canvas, the actual spinner itself doesn't get super large. I don't know if we can make this any larger. It might just be the same options. Yeah. And so again, you might decide to import like maybe your own GIF and use a spinner that way, but sometimes this is plenty sufficient for what you're doing, especially if you have like a backdrop or something like that that clearly indicates to the user that, hey, you're waiting on some data. Again, feel free to explore the advanced pane. It's going to cover a lot of what you find up here in the top left too, but spinner's nice and simple, easy to use. The other one that I wanted to cover is the horizontal bar chart. This is very cool. What it will ask you to do is attach some data, and I don't have a great use case for data, so I want to just add my own statically in here. But I wanted to discuss kind of how I figured out how to do that, because one of the things that can be challenging, so it's going to give you dummy data here, you can see, but one of the things that can be challenging using the Creator Kit is, aside from the options you see over here, display and even under advanced, it's still not super intuitive. How do I get my own data in here, and what sort of like data format do I need to feed into this? This is where the items is kind of where you would feed the data. What do I need to feed into this so that it presents nicely here? So I want to highlight a resource that is really helpful to reference as you are using these components, especially if they are not super self-explanatory. So we're going to use this one as an example. So this is the Fluent horizontal bar chart. And if you come over here to the Creator Kit, again, I'll have a link to this in the description. So this is all still under the Creator Kit where we looked at like the overview and how to install it. And there is a section for Creator Kit components. And this will go over all of the different components that are in the kit. These are all stored somewhere in GitHub, so you can go to GitHub and actually read the specs. But it covers a little bit of kind of how it works at a high level. And then you can actually drill into the individual components. So in our case, it's a chart, horizontal bar chart. This one, again, is in preview, so things are still being worked out. This looks pretty similar to what we saw when we first added it to our Power App. And if you scroll down here, it gives you a more in-depth description of each of the properties. And if you go towards the bottom, it gives you this nice table which shows some more sample data. So item title, legend, value, etc. So if we grab this data, copy it to our clipboard, we're going to come back over here to our Power App. I'm going to click on our component under items. This is where we're going to add our data. It'll take a second and you will see it churn out the new data. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is kind of the format that we had fed it. Again, we've got 4 different objects here. It does really easily define the format of your data. So if you're going to add your own data, maybe dynamically you pull it in from SharePoint List or Excel or something like that, it shows you all of the values that you kind of need to provide for it to appear the way that it does. And what's nice is this gives you a lot of flexibility over the colors. And if you wanted to statically type some values and dynamically populate others, maybe you have like a goal of 100, and then you bring in the progress value dynamically, you could do that. So one of the things that is tough with these Creator Kit components is just understanding how to use them fully, because again, you're not going to get a lot of description right here once a component is added. So it's great to lean on the Microsoft Learn resources, dive into a component, figure out how it's used, maybe visit the GitHub documentation if you find that helpful, and then really just play around with it before you start adding it to maybe production apps. And again, always be mindful that some of these components are in preview. Granted, this was a while ago, but they do want to specify that they're not meant for production. In my experience, I haven't had any issues with them. Something as simple as a bar graph probably isn't too problematic anyways. Alrighty, folks, that does it for this quick overview on how to use the Power Platform Creator Kit. At the time of this filming, there were 5 library components available in the kit and north of 30 code components. There are also a lot of items that are still in preview, which I imagine will be completed later this year. There are a lot of fun elements inside the kit, and a lot of them are very practical. A new header, a dialog box, there's something called a panel, which is kind of like a slide out. A lot of things that you might end up building yourself, but if you don't want to build it yourself, maybe you have a client that doesn't care so much about aesthetic and doesn't want that to be personalized, you can either build an MVP really quickly using these components or final production apps if the purpose is not for it to be super unique. Because as is the case with any library, whether it's traditional web development or here in Power Apps, everything kind of ends up looking the same if you're using that same library over and over again. Of course, that's the intention, but if you have clients that just want something quick and easy, looks good enough, functions well, then the Creator Kit is a great way to get started quickly and do a lot of things like this bar chart, which would be a little bit more complicated to do yourself. And the Creator Kit just makes it easy and accessible. Again, before you do any of this, you need to ensure that you have the correct admin settings. That was covered kind of earlier in this video. If you come here and go to the import components and don't see the code view, that means that setting is probably not turned on in your tenant, and you either need to come up here to the admin settings yourself or ask one of your admins to do that. So go out there, find some components, have fun, and don't forget to read the documentation. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.